Hello and welcome to today's grammar lesson. I will try to explain to you today the difference between the present simple and the present continuous, and when we use each of these two tenses and how we separate the two, and when we need to know when to use one or when to use the other. Okay, we're going to look firstly at when we use the present simple. We'll look at when we use the present continuous tense, and we'll also have a brief comparison of the two, okay, and to see when we can use one and when we can't use the other. All right, so that is what we're going to do. Now let's go straight to the classroom. Now part one, as we can see here, is when we use the present simple. Okay, so we use the present simple tense with things that are always true. We use it for things that have stayed the same for a long time, and we use it to say how often something happens, okay, with what frequency something happens. Now we're going to look at those 3 points individually and some examples as well, so let's go to that. Now the first one here is the present simple with things that are always true. Now the examples here would be, he comes from South Africa. Okay, he comes from South Africa. He was born in South Africa. That's where he comes from. It's always going to be true. You can't change that. So that's where he comes from. Another example would be, milk boils when you heat it. Milk boils when you heat it. So if you heat milk long enough, it boils. Okay, so milk boils when you heat it. And the last one here is, the sun rises in the east. The sun comes up every day it comes up in the same place, the east, so the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, of course. Now, the present simple here, the second one, is for things that have stayed the same for a long time. Examples: my parents live in Australia. My parents live in Australia, okay? It's been that way for a long time. They could move. I'm not saying that they might not ever move, but at the moment they live in Australia, so it's a thing that has stayed that way for a long time, hence we use the present simple. Another example, he works for a big company. He's been there for a long time. It's a general fact. He works for a big company, okay? Now the next example here is when we say how often something happens. We use the present simple. Examples: I always work on Saturdays. Always, okay? I always work on Saturdays. I often eat fish for lunch. So I often have fish for lunch. And I get up every day at 8 a.m. Okay? How often that happens? I get up every day. Every day it happens. I get up every day at 8 a.m. Okay, now let's go and have a look at the present continuous. Now here we are, part two, when we use the present continuous. Let's have a look at these examples. So we use this tense for things that are happening now, for temporary situations around now, and for changing situations. We'll have a look at those 3 points individually now as well. So the first one we can see is for things happening now. The examples are, it's snowing very heavily outside now. It's snowing very heavily. I'm eating my lunch. Well, in this moment I'm not. I'm teaching English. But if you are sitting down eating your lunch, it's happening now. You are eating your lunch. And he's watching TV. Okay, it's what he's doing in this particular moment. So Bill, Fred, Jack, Ralph, whoever, he's watching TV. Okay. The next one is for temporary situations around now. Examples: I'm reading a great book at the moment. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm reading it in this particular instant, but I'm reading a book around this particular time. So I'm reading a great book at the moment. So maybe in the evening, maybe in the mornings, that's when I read the book, but it's around now. So we say I'm reading a great book at the moment. Max is studying medicine at university. Not necessarily in this particular instant. He doesn't have to be physically at the university today, but in general, he's studying medicine at university. It's a temporary situation that's happening around us at the moment. and Jenny is teaching science at the local school. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a permanent thing, but it's a temporary situation that's happening today. So she's teaching science at the local school at the moment, okay? And the last one here is for changing situations. The examples that I'm going to show you are: the weather is getting warmer. So we understand that the weather is changing, okay? So we're using that continuous tense. The weather is changing. It was cold last week. Today it's hot. The weather is getting warmer slowly. The next one, the situation is starting to get ugly. Situation was normal a few minutes ago. Now people are arguing. The situation is starting to get ugly. And the final one here is Halloween is becoming a popular event. When I was a child, Halloween wasn't popular. Go to Australia now, every child celebrates it. So it's becoming a popular event. Halloween is becoming popular, okay? Slowly, it's starting to become popular. So that is for the changing situation that is in progression, a changing situation. Now, the final thing we're going to do is compare the two and have a look at when we can and when we can't use some of these tenses, okay? So part 3, here we are, comparing the two sentences. Let's have a look. Now, firstly, let's read what we see here. Continuous tenses are only used for actions and things that are happening. Non-action verbs like love, like, know, understand, want, etc. are not normally used in continuous tenses. Now, English is a language where you're going to see normally a lot. Okay, there's never anything certain, so they're always going to say normally. Some examples: I want something to eat. I'm hungry. I want something to eat now. Okay, so we use the present simple here. He understands what you mean. Okay, again, he understands. We couldn't say he is understanding, or we couldn't say I am wanting something to eat. So we use the present simple tense in those examples. Likewise, with see, hear, smell, and taste, we normally use the present simple. Examples: I smell something fishy, okay? Not I'm smelling. I am smelling, but we don't use it in that sense. We say I smell something fishy, or this food tastes really good. This food tastes really good. Now, we say normally because sometimes you're going to hear some exceptions. You're going to hear people saying those verbs in continuous tenses. But again, normally we don't use them, okay? Now, thank you very much for watching. Any doubts or comments, just please leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye.